Welcome to the Who's Left podcast, a show about Indiana politics, history, and culture from the unapologetic perspective of the social democratic left. My name is Scott Aaron Rogers, and I'm recording from Bloomington. We are back and forged in the fires of a year from hell, ready for what looks to be an incredibly difficult 2025. Also back for 2025 is the General Assembly, not even a week into the new session and already beginning to test Hoosiers' tolerance for pain. Now, try as they might, and they put up some incredible candidates, many of whom we spoke with here, Indiana Democrats were unable to break the GOP supermajority. Republicans have now held an insurmountable trifecta, the State House and Senate, as well as the governor's office, for 15 years. With little ability for the opposition party or the public to push back, Indiana's far-right Republicans have once again offered Hoosiers an all-you-can-eat buffet of shit with the slate of bills they've introduced. Only about 10% of the legislation put forward at the beginning of the session will make it through, so I needed someone to come in and help me dig through this mess, to point out what is nuts, and highlight the occasional golden kernel. That's right, Indiana. We keep things classy around here. Starting 2025 off with a poop joke. So, with my sincerest apologies for introducing my guest immediately after that gem, joining me today is Kaitie Rector, the Director of Advocacy for MADVoters, a nonprofit focused on advancing equity in Indiana. Created in 2022 by a small group of Hoosier moms who wanted to support efforts to create a better Indiana for all families, MADVoters educates Hoosiers on voting, legislation, elections, and civics so that they feel empowered to advocate for themselves at the ballot box and beyond. In this conversation, we'll do a quick review of how a bill becomes a law in Indiana before taking a high-level look at some of the main areas of focus for the supermajority. Kaitie will introduce some of the most egregious bills on MADVoters' radar this session and spotlight a few pieces of legislation that actually don't suck. We'll talk about how to contact your legislators and what to say when you do. Now, before we turn to the interview, do please consider supporting Who's Left with a paid subscription. I currently work as an independent craftsman during the day and work on this project whenever I can. There are so many more things I want to do here at Who's Left, more campaign finance research especially, more live hangouts, a daily episode if we can get there, but I need your help. So if you can, visit scottaaronrogers.substack.com and subscribe at the paid level. For $5 a month or $50 a year, you can help me push our state in a better direction. And maybe if we reach critical mass, I can put down my tool belt and devote my full time to you, to this project, and to Indiana's future. So, if you have the means, pause right now, go to scottaaronrogers.substack.com and subscribe at the paid level. And while the best way to help this project is financially, if that doesn't work for you at this time, you can still help. Subscribe at the free level over on Substack. Set your favorite podcast player to auto-download new episodes of the show. Rate and review the show on whatever platform you use. Follow me on social media. Facebook, Blue Sky, YouTube, and TikTok at Who's Left. That's just two. HOOS Left. On Instagram, Threads, and Twitter, or whatever you want to call it. I'm at ScottRog78, that's SCOTTROG78, and on Mastodon at ScottRog78 at Hoosier.social. Please, subscribe on whichever platforms you use, and send me a DM to discuss ideas for the project. But most importantly, spread the word. Forward the articles to friends, family, and colleagues. Don't just like, but share on social media. Invite others to our little corner of the Indiana left. And I might be the guy with the microphone, but I try to take this thing where your input leads me. So, please be generous with feedback. Good, bad, I value it all. To those who have joined this community already, especially those paid subscribers, thank you for believing in me and this project, and to everybody, thanks for listening. Now, here's MADVoters' Kaitie Rector. Kaitie Rector, welcome to the Who's Left podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for letting us be here.
I really appreciate you being here, and I appreciate everything MADVoters does. You guys are a fantastic organization. Let's start there, just real quick. For the people who don't know already, tell us about MADVoters and what you guys do.
Sure. So MADVoters is an Indiana nonprofit focused on civic education and empowerment. We really focus the goal of improving and strengthening equity in Indiana. So we take a high-level approach in terms of we focus on reproductive rights, equitable education, safe communities, economic opportunities. So we really have a large umbrella of things we cover. We're volunteer-based, so we focus on everything from legislative education and tracking the legislative session to supporting candidates by providing them with education who align with our values, to showing up at events, festivals, and different events throughout the year to educate people. So we really are just focused on an all-encompassing empowering people and educating people so that they can advocate best for themselves, their families, and the causes that are most important to them.
Yeah, fantastic organization. How long have you been with MADVoters, Kaitie?
So we started right after the 2022 election, actually. Mm-hmm. So myself and a small group of just concerned citizens really kind of came together and sort of came up with this idea of we wanted to do something, help strengthen current efforts for equity and progress, but we also wanted to fill in what we thought were some gaps. And so over the last couple of years, we've just assembled a fantastic team of moms and dads and grandparents and retired folks and college students and high school kids and just people all over the place who are just united in this fight for equity and progress for our state.
And we've sort of, run into a wall of equity and progress because for the last, we're going on 15 years now of Republican supermajority in the state house, where they control both the House and the Senate, and they have such a wide majority that they can do whatever they want, essentially.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
Let's talk about the process first, sort of just little quick schoolhouse rock review of how a bill becomes a law in the state of Indiana.
Right. So here in Indiana, we've got our state legislature, which is the lawmaking body. And we might remember from Schoolhouse Rock, there's the three branches of government: your executive, your legislative, your judicial. MADVoters focuses really on Indiana. And so while President and Congress, sometimes come up on the news for us, we really are focused on explaining to people how the state laws are impacting their lives, right? So with the legislative session, it just began last week in January. They will meet 4 days a week, Monday to Thursday, from now until the end of April. And so what they're going to be doing over the next couple weeks is they've filed all of their bills. We have a couple more days left for House bills, but for the most part, all the bills are in. We're looking at easily around 1,000 bills that get filed by the legislators. Your House bills, your Senate bills, your senators, of course, are filing the Senate bills, representatives filing the House bills. And as those bills get filed, they get assigned to a committee. The committee is a small bipartisan group of legislators who can elect to study a bill for more consideration. If they bring that bill into their committee, they can amend it or change it. They'll also bring opportunity for public comment in. They'll pass that bill, and then it goes to the full chamber, the House or the Senate. What we're seeing right now is most bills are just in the committee process. And so while a committee may receive dozens of bills that get assigned to it by the Senate or the House leadership, it's the chairman or the chairwoman of the committee who ultimately gets to decide if that bill is brought forth for consideration.
And because, real quick,
yes,
this is a Republican supermajority, and so because it's a Republican supermajority, all of the committee chairs are Republicans.
Exactly.
So they choose what really makes it forward. Yeah.
Correct. And then you've got the, so like I said, it's a bipartisan group, right? You've got Republicans and Democrats on the committees, but they are in a ratio to sort of reflect the chamber makeup. And so the Democrats on all of the committees make up less than half. So it means that things often get passed or don't pass on party lines. Which is really frustrating and stifles progress. That is absolutely something that is important for MADVoters to overcome, because it's not for us about, we stick with just one party. We're a nonpartisan organization that is focused on equity and progress. And so it's our values that guide us. And so ultimately we are really focused on trying to see through these good bills and defeat these bad bills, and then really empower people to participate in the civic process. So once these bills, it's quite a few that actually make it out of committee, then they'll go to the full chamber for consideration. Things move so quickly. Like I said, that session goes just until the end of April, really. So it's a part-time legislature. They're making these rules or these laws for us just over the course of a couple months. And so with this being a budget session, every other year they are working to craft the state budget. That's going to take a large part of the session, but then they'll also have all kinds of other laws that they pass about education and healthcare and property taxes and all kinds of things. So with this being the budget session, we can anticipate a lot of bills and potential laws being discussed that impact the financial side of things. But there's more than just that. There's definitely some of the culture war issues that we've been seeing the last few weeks do crop up.
Well, okay, so sort of maintaining our sort of how a bill gets through here. We talked about going through committee, and then they go through their chamber, and so they're like halfway through,
right?
About the end of February, maybe.
Yep. They'll take switch. They do, and they'll take like a week break, and then they switch. So then the House bills that have gotten passed so far, which again, far fewer. You've got hundreds of bills that get authored in the House, and another, several hundred in the Senate, but only a small fraction make it through, and then they have to go through the whole process again, the committees, the full chamber, and then if they've changed that bill, so if the Senate decided to change a House bill, then they send it back over. The House has to basically sign off on it. So you go from 1,000 bills being filed to maybe 100, 150 actually becoming law, and ultimately the chairman of these committees, and then your House leadership, your Senate leadership, have a massive amount of power when it comes to what those bills are. And so we see so many fantastic bills that just die in committee because they just don't get scheduled for a hearing. And so one thing that we're really focused on is encouraging people to contact these chairmen and chairwomen and say, hey, this bill, whatever number, is really important to me. I want you to bring it to your committee for a hearing. Or, I saw this bill, and this bill really concerns me, and I'm asking you as the chairperson, keep this bill out of committee. And now that's not to say that language can't be amended in later in the process, and we see that kind of funny business, especially at the end of the session. But those committees are a huge step in advancing or opposing bills.
Okay, so let's talk about the kind of bills that we're going to see this session. I assume they're going to, you mentioned, property taxes and education and healthcare. So what are sort of the high level kind of categories that the supermajority has their eye on this session?
So we definitely have seen a lot with property tax reform. We saw the candidates, for governor on all sides. Property tax and housing affordability was very important. The governor, of course, isn't writing the laws, but he or she would sign off on them. And so their agenda definitely shapes things. So we see our legislature taking cues from the incoming governor in terms of reforming property tax, trying to tackle healthcare affordability and attainability. We also know that education funding, that makes up about half of the budget for the whole state. So that's a massive part. But the whole budget is interesting because it's actually, it's a bill, many, many, many pages long that they will, just like any other bill, the committee studies, and then the House, because it starts in the House, they go through their process, they send it to the Senate, it goes back. It's a little bit of, a ping pong effect. But we see a lot in terms of the financial side of things. But we also know in terms of taking cues from the incoming administration, like I said, education and funding, the voucher, the choice program, we can a little bit. Skimming through the bills, we do have, we track these bills. We don't track all, 1,000 of them, but
You're right.
That would be an undertaking.
I'm sure a lot of them are pretty mundane.
Some are,
not
yes.
something that we're going to need to get.
Mm-hmm. Right. Some of them are, identifying, who the state mammal, for example. That's a bill right now. And that's all part of writing laws is, some of the mundane things or the benign things. And so there's those bills, and those don't really fall within our scope. We take a look at bills that affect our core values. And so those are kind of the policy positions that we take in terms of healthcare, education, economics, community, and then principles of democracy like voting rights and access and civil rights and things like that. And so once we kind of look at all that, it leads us down, MADVoters, to about 100 bills that we're following. Because they positively or negatively can impact our lives, equity, and progress. And that's available right now at madvoters.org. We've got a spreadsheet set up. We've got the bills all listed in layman's terms, the author. We also have the committees listed, and it's at a clickable hot link so that you can just click to email the chairman. So that's what we really are encouraging people over the next few weeks, because the bills are in committee just until February 17th. And the committees usually meet once a week. So early to mid-February is really when we expect them to kind of button up the committees. Then they'll go on to the full House or Senate. Some bills, will pass out of committee this next week, and they'll, the House and Senate will be meeting as a full chamber. So it's not like all the bills, move in unison. It's a lot of moving in pieces. But in terms of, what's that deadline of asking committee chairs to act on bills? We're looking at, second week of February, 1st, if we want to be safe, to make sure that, you don't miss your chance.
So we're a couple weeks out from this. As of this.
But it moves very quickly. And once they're out of committee, it's very easy for the House, to agree on a bill and to pass it within just a matter of days. And then they send it to the Senate, and if they don't really have anything to add or change, then they can pass it, and it can go to the governor, by the end of the month. So we see bills move very, very quickly. It's not like they have to, they all move in this same process. So it's really important for us to break down this process and to help people understand how quickly things move so that they can take advantage of participating in the process.
Yeah, there's a lot of moving parts there.
It is, yes.
We as citizen Hoosiers are really thankful that you guys do all that legwork. Just such a fantastic job. So let's talk about, without getting too deep in the weeds, let's sort of talk about some of the bills that you guys are really flagging and keeping an eye on this session.
Okay.
Where would you like to start?
Well, let's talk a little bit about some of the bills that have raised some red flags for us. Okay.
Yeah.
So one of the bills that was filed has to do with education, with schools. And this is House Bill 1136. So it's going to start in the House of Representatives. This is the one that would dissolve some public school corporations and replace them with charter schools. This raises a lot of flags for us. We've seen in 2 decades of single party rule, a defunding and a funneling away of funds and resources from public schools into alternative options. We know that thanks to 2 sessions ago, the other previous budget session, we opened up the school voucher, the choice system, to pretty much every Hoosier family. Like 97% qualify, because the cap now, income cap, is like $230,000. So if you and your family, are making $230,000 or under, you're eligible for a state subsidy for your private school tuition. So we are taking state funds, giving them to families, many of whom are very well off, to pay for their private schools, and yet our income caps for things like rental assistance, childcare assistance, food assistance are very, very low. So you have so many, middle-class Hoosiers who are just struggling to pay the bills too, who they can't get assistance with their rent or their groceries or their childcare, but, their wealthier neighbors can have their private school tuition greatly subsidized. That's a problem. And so in terms of what we see with charter schools, that is separate, but it's the same idea. It's this taking away from our traditional public schools. So the idea with a charter school is it's not a private school. It doesn't use a voucher. The idea of those, when they were announced many, many years ago, they've been around for a long time, is to be this innovative way of educating people. Okay, fair. The problem is, rather than having a locally elected school board, a charter school has a board of business people or community members, officials of the state, who act as their board. And in an ideal world, maybe that could work. But unfortunately, what we see, even in Indianapolis alone, for example, we see 1 in 3 charter schools have closed. There's a lack of accountability. There's a lack of oversight, that lack of local control, because you don't have a locally elected school board to govern. We've even seen quite a bit of issues with fraud and embezzlement of money with the charter school funds. And then charter schools are just held to a little bit of a different accountability measure than a traditional public school. The idea is they're not supposed to discriminate or turn kids away. But charter schools may not have, they're not required, to hold the same staffing requirements. So they may not have, for example, special education teachers to serve kiddos with IEPs. They don't really have to require like transportation services. So we see just a lot of inequitable issues, whether we're talking charters or vouchers. When you allow schools to kind of cherry pick, or you don't, hold them accountable, we see our rural kids, for example, who don't have options within their area, or kids with transportation issues, that underserves them. So this bill 1136, that would basically take school corporations that have 50% or more of the kiddos within their district, if they're going to different schools. So we see IPS and Indy, Gary Community Schools, but even some really small rural school corporations. If there's just a few hundred kids that would live within that district, and let's say, there's a local Catholic school, half the kids, which might be a class of 100, go to the Catholic school, and half of the kids go to the public school. Well, now all of a sudden with this bill, they will dissolve that local public school and put a charter in. And I just think of all the ways that our public schools do serve our communities. They provide transportation, they provide special education services, they provide meals, in addition to things like for especially the small towns, the football games and
Yeah.
sports. I mean, those are things that we think about, we may be losing those. We will lose those if we move to privatize or we move to a charter school model. And so we really want folks to be aware of that one. That's
Yeah, and this bill would dissolve entire school districts.
Yes.
Like IPS, Gary Community Schools.
Yes.
And
not just like a school building, the entire district, right? So I mean, in IPS, you're looking at like 50 schools. And the fact is that model in Indy already is not successful because 1 in 3 are closing. And so now we're going to force dozens of schools to adopt a model that has no proven track record of success. It doesn't make sense. And so you wonder, what's the intention behind the bill? Where's it coming from? Like, this is not, it just doesn't appear like it's well thought out.
Yeah. It's well thought out, but it's not crafted to actually benefit the people of the state.
Right. I mean, it's this idea of, as we funnel all these resources away, and then we say, well, look, our public schools are failing. Well, first off, they're not failing. They're the choice of 90% of Hoosier families. And secondly, what do you expect to happen when you're taking money and funds away, but then also sort of elevating conspiracy and rhetoric against the public schools that we've seen so much in the last few years? So it absolutely, we see that our public schools are under attack. And so our focus is to really ensure that our public funds are used for our public schools, and also that we have that local control, the locally elected school boards, that we allow our schools the oversight they need to serve their students, because a district in Indianapolis is going to be very different from, the district where I live in a very small town of less than 1,000. We trust our public schools. We believe that we need to empower those public schools. And that if we want a model that truly serves all students, that's public schools. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We just need to appropriately fund them. And it is expensive in terms of, like, you look at the pie chart of the budget and people say, well, look at all this, this money that's going to schools. Yes, it is. But the payoff of having an educated population is worth it. And we also see, Indiana does not really actually fund their schools particularly well. We are closer to the bottom in terms of our per pupil funding of schools. So it's not like we're just throwing tons and tons and tons of money and it's like, oh my gosh, we're doing everything we can. We're really not. We've been diluting and harming our public schools for decades. It's really no surprise to see, like, now we have concerns, and it's unfortunate to see through legislative action they're trying to almost hasten the downfall so that they can then say, oh look, but now we have private and charter schools.
Yep.
We see what you're doing and we don't like it.
Yeah, it's the classic the bully technique. Then the the legislature is essentially saying to our public schools, why are you hitting yourself?
Yes, and it's like, well, you're the one that controls the purse strings, so that one's a huge concern.
This bill is a big red flag, and I'm going to dive deep into this one with Dr. Michael Schaefer here.
Wonderful. You can absolutely, you could do such a deep dive on that one. Other concerns from the educational standpoint, if we just stay there, there's a bill that requires school corporations to display the 10 Commandments in the library and classroom.
The First Amendment's just a suggestion, right?
Right. There's that. There's one that allows unaccredited high schools to issue diplomas. We have bills to make school board races partisan. So again, just education is huge. That's not the only concern, though. We've got multiple bills that prohibit possessing or mailing abortion pills, mifepristone and misoprostol, and
which, by the way, are still federally approved, FDA regulated medication.
They are.
Project 2025 comes down the pipe. But
well, and the concern is so with these bills, not only with one of them, not only does it prohibit prescribing them, possessing them, or using them, which, let's not forget, abortion pills are used for miscarriage management, right?
Yes.
If we criminalize those and you read through the bill, it doesn't say like, oh, you can use abortion pills if you're having a miscarriage. It says no abortion pills at all. So now we're going to force people who have had a miscarriage and a retained placenta or the products of conception, who, their bodies don't just naturally flush it out. We're going to force them to undergo a surgical procedure, a D&C. Usually you're under anesthesia. So the whole idea of putting people to sleep to do a surgery has a lot higher risk of side effects than the medication, the pill, which is proven safe, very long track record.
Safer than Tylenol, safer than Viagra.
Yes. The concern, though, with one of those bills, and it is number 245, we've got two senators behind that one, Senator Liz Brown, Senator Tyler Johnson, both very, very active in the Northeast Indiana Right to Life, both very funded by those that camp as well, behind that bill. And that bill is also wanting to reschedule the abortion pills as a Category 4 drug. So they're wanting to actually change it here in Indiana to make it possible, now it's a more dangerous type of drug. So hence now it warrants this kind of control, which of course is not accurate, is not reflected by science. But we see, you look at the legislators attached to the bills and you think like, that legislator, we know, or legislators are connected with very well-funded, very deep pockets of organizations that are really focused on rolling back reproductive freedom. That definitely throws red flags for us. So that's one that's concerning. We also see bills that are going to require voters to register with the political party, which really disenfranchises our independent voters. And even potentially criminalize homelessness. There were some, we're watching them, that provide that, police could be dispatched to remove people from areas.
And this just for being homeless, like not even having to do anything, just
being, being in that, on that property. It was interesting because you reading through the bill, they're flagged as property rights. Is how they're presenting them. But we don't see, and we haven't seen the budget bill fully yet, but we haven't seen provisions to address homelessness and how do we help these unhoused people. We just see like, oh, we'll just get them off the property. So we just, there's a lack of compassion there.
It sounds like property rights are more important to the supermajority than human rights.
It makes you wonder. Yeah, it does. But then, we see, this idea of property rights and ownership seems so important, in that bill. But then we've seen bills in the past, and there are bills coming through now that want to take away that local control and that want to prevent cities and towns, for example, from being able to provide certain services to citizens. Whether it's restricting the ability for public transportation to make the bus lines. There's bills that restrict cities and towns from being able to assist their citizens in getting abortion pills. There's all kinds of things. So there's some hypocrisy there too, in terms of, if these things are actually important, then like it should be apparent, but it shouldn't sort of be a pick and choose type thing.
There's not a lot of ideological consistency.
No,
right?
A lot of cognitive dissonance. Parental rights is a big one, right? Parental rights is so important until a parent with their physician is trying to access certain types of care for their children, and now all of a sudden the legislature says, well, no, you can't do that. Says parental rights are some, but not for others. That's a concern.
Sounds like there's more attacks on the trans youth and the LGBT LGBTQ community at large
Yes.
this session.
Yep. We've seen those. We saw it in previous years too. The ACLU referred to it as the slate of hate. Bills that don't seem to really elevate Hoosiers at all, but they're just existing to demean and exclude. So we've seen ones, and again, these bills, some of them get filed many, many years in a row. The legislator just files the same bill. So we've seen ones to make going to the bathroom, to a restroom that doesn't align with your biological sex, make that a misdemeanor. I mean, why? It's not that trans people are causing issues in the bathroom. It's that predatory people are causing issues in the bathroom. They're not trans people. They're predators. Let's address them instead of attacking vulnerable people. We see a bill to require colleges and universities, the public ones here in Indiana, expressly designate if the sport is for males or females or co-ed. Which again is like, is that really a big issue? I mean, is that something really impacting Hoosiers and their ability to feed their families and protect their families and house their families? But not only does that bill require universities, and basically tie their hands and completely prevent trans women from playing, but it also requires teams who come in from out of state to declare to our teams here in Indiana, hey, we allow a trans woman to play on our team. At least 60 days before competition. And it's just, again, is that really helping? Well, no, of course not. It's
this is the NCAA and the NAIA. They exist for reasons. That's their purview. Yeah. Why are we wasting state and taxpayers' time and resources?
Right.
To single out, I mean, a couple people in the entire state, probably.
Sure. Right. If that, I mean, we know when Indiana passed the ban on trans youth at the K-12 level a few years ago, we know Governor Holcomb actually vetoed it. And in his veto letter, he said, he wasn't really in support of trans people playing on the sports teams. But for him, the reason why he vetoed it is he could not find a single instance of where this was actually an issue. So we were this whole bill, this whole law. We went through this whole long process. Remember I said 1,000 bills get filed, but a very small fraction made it through. So we wasted, an opportunity to actually elevate and empower Hoosiers on a bill on an issue that doesn't even exist. And then they overruled his veto and they passed it anyway.
Yeah. That's another one of the things that a super majority can do that a simple majority cannot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it really obliterates this whole system of checks and balances, because the legislature can now pick what bills they want to write, pass the bills. Doesn't matter if the minority party doesn't like it. There's enough of the majority that they have more than the majority, more than half. And then they can even overrule the governor. So that's not checks and balances at all.
And all this on top of the fact that they've drawn themselves through rigged maps into positions where they can't lose.
Exactly.
So they can't lose. You can't remove them, and they can override the governor.
Right.
They've really got us up against the wall.
Yep.
And
we've had independent, organizations look at our district maps, and they've said, my gosh, Indiana is so gerrymandered, more gerrymandered than most of the entire United States when you look at other legislative districts. I mean, it's not that, and we see some of the elected officials say, well, Indiana is a red state, it's a Republican state, it's the people have spoken. You've kind of really rubbed it in your favor, Not only are people, you've set it up in a way that only one side really can win, but you've also got people so discouraged of what's the point in voting? It doesn't matter. What's the point? And so now we see, of course, we have one of the worst voter turnouts. We have voters who are just like, I don't really care to participate. And we've made voting not particularly convenient here either. And again, as we've seen in previous years, they're again trying to roll back our voting rights, make voting a little bit harder, a little bit more inconvenient. there's a bill by Senator Gary Byrne to decrease early voting to just 7 days rather than the almost month that we have.
Because apparently our already dismal worst in the country voter turnout.
Yeah, we're second to worst, so I guess we can just go to the bottom. Like, it just, when you look at it, if, okay, Indiana's the worst or second worst, we need to improve that. We don't need to make it harder. Voting is a right, and so we should be empowering people and encouraging people. And that's, if you say that you're for the people and for democracy, why are you passing bills that make it really hard for people to go vote, really inconvenient? Why do you have such limited hours? Why do you have such strict requirements? So they say one thing, but the intent is something very different.
It's quite a skill they've got there to talk out of both sides of their mouths.
And
what else do you keep an eye on?
They don't want to care about politics because they say, "Oh, look, it's all just shady." Well,
right.
It can be very shady, and I absolutely understand why you're apathetic and discouraged. But the best way to change it is from within, is to participate.
Well, let's talk about that. So, we've got this supermajority. They've drawn themselves into seats where you can't vote them out. They've secured such a supermajority that they can override governor's vetoes.
Yep.
What are we to do if we don't like these bills that they've got coming down the pipe?
So there's a few things, because people say, like, oh, we just have to vote and we got to change. Like, yeah, okay, voting helps, but it's also January 2025. We don't have another election until 2026.
Yeah, now what? Yeah.
Right, now what? We got to live with it now for, 2 years. Because the elections that we'll have coming up is just for, like, the political parties.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we citizens don't really have an election for a while. Okay, so what do we do? The first thing is to figure out who your officials are, your legislators. So it's been a while for a lot of us since we were in school. A lot of us don't know who our elected officials are. We don't know. We, the name, like, oh, Mike Braun, like, I know that name, but I don't really know what he's doing. Representative, Congress, Senator, like, I know those names, but I don't know what they are. So the idea is try to kind of get a handle on who these people are. So we've got our state government, right? You got your state representative, your state senator. There's 100 representatives. There's 50 senators. They work together and they form the Indiana General Assembly, the legislature. That's who we've been talking about passing the laws. So to find out who they are, you can go to MADVoters.org. We've linked the Indiana General Assembly website there. Put your address in, it'll tell you who your representative and senator are. Write their name down, their email, their phone number. We've got that on our bill tracker. We put their direct phone number for their legislative assistant on our tracker, because most of the phone numbers you'll find out there just go to the switchboard for the state house. But we wanted to empower people to be able to call after hours. Because a lot of people are working or they're busy through the day. So we were really intentional in setting up those phone numbers that will take you to the legislator's assistant, and you can leave voicemails. And you can email them. You can even write them a letter if you want. We know that phone calls are very effective to your specific representative or senator. Emails are also effective. The online petitions and things like that, they count. I mean, they help, but it really, really matters to have a personalized message. And it doesn't have to be like a long paragraph. It can just be like, hey, Senator so-and-so, my name is blank. I'm your constituent. I'm calling to oppose bill number blank because blank, or support. And that can be it, just a couple sentences. You don't have to write a whole long paragraph, and they're probably not going to read, pages and pages anyway. But those kind of reach outs are very important. And so our bill tracker, we've set that up to be as easy as possible. And
if that, I'm sure that could be intimidating for some people.
Absolutely.
All their senator or representative. Yep. And you make it easy, right? You've got like a whole script.
That's the point. Yeah. We want to remove those barriers, and just normalize this for people. Like, It takes 2 minutes. Call, you're not going to be talking to your senator or your representative. You're going to be talking to a legislative assistant. Be nice to them. A lot of them are like 20-year-olds. They're just trying to learn the ropes. But they will call. They'll take your information. They'll mark, hey, constituent in this area supports or opposes this. So call often, email often. But again, with all these bad bills that we've talked about, and if time allows, maybe we can go over some of the good bills too. But go to those committee chairs, and those are linked on our tracker, and say, I want you to hear this bill in your committee, or I don't want you to hear this bill in your committee, and include like a reason why, like this matters to me because, and really, really push that over the next couple of weeks, because once the bill's out of committee, it moves so fast, and being able to stop them if it's a bad bill in a committee, or get it into a committee if it's a good bill, is so important.
So really, for citizens, this is really the last time we get a chance to make our voices heard.
Yes.
and really put our thumbs on the scale. Before these bills become law.
Right. Right.
We've gone through the election part. We've had our say there. Maybe for a lot of us it didn't go the way we wanted, but we can't just slink off and cower in the corner and lick our wounds. There are things to do.
I mean, this is we see our state government has such a massive impact on our lives and the way we're living. And I know so many people are paying attention to federal, but it is the state that sets so many of our policies, our healthcare, our education, our roads. That affects us in many, many more greater ways than the federal government. It's less glamorous, we don't have a big fancy White House, but it's very important to engage with the state government, and even down, to your local, your state or your county. They also have a system in place where they've got the executive branch, the legislative branch, the judicial branch, at your city and county level too.
And these things affect our lives, like you said, much more on a day-to-day basis. It's your state and local government that's going to have an impact on your everyday life far more than the attention-grabbing national news.
Absolutely, your gas tax. That's state. That's not something the president says.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, so things can seem pretty dismal. Sounds like there's a lot of bad stuff in committee, a lot of attacks on people's rights, a lot of attacks on public education. You said there might be some good stuff in here, so let's talk about some positive things here.
Yes,
to leave.
So we've got quite a few good bills. And we see those on both sides of the aisle. It's really important, as you're looking at the bills, if you notice that a bill is filed by a member of the minority party, which here in Indiana would be the Democrats, that one might need a little bit more of a nudge, because the Republicans chairing all those committees, they get to pick, and, they typically will advance legislation from members of their own party. That's how it works in the way we've got local parties set up, right? They're going to advance their own. So
with enough popular nudging.
Yes, but with some nudging, you can get it across the finish line. And we've seen that. We saw some Democratic legislators. We even saw some new Democratic legislators get bills passed last year in their first year, which is very exciting. And we've seen some really good bills filed by Republicans as well. So really, we want to focus on the intent of the bill and the impact of the bill. So we see several bills to improve teacher compensation. We know that in Indiana, teachers are effectively paid less now than they were 20 years ago. Our salaries and wages haven't kept up with inflation. And then, of course, you've got the whole issue of decreasing and having to split the funding pie more. So we have a few bills to increase the minimum salary. Those are exciting. We've got bills that would decriminalize the possession of test strips. So we especially devastating, I think, to a lot of rural communities who feel insane. The overdose, the opioid crisis, just devastates these communities. There are several bills with authors on both sides of the fence to make the test strips so that if someone is testing a substance, they can flag it for additives that aren't supposed to be there that are contributing to these overdose deaths. Some of those were filed last year too, and they didn't really move. We're hoping this year maybe some of them do. Different couple, 2-3 bills for test strips. We've seen a bill to improve firearm storage and to hold people accountable if they don't safely store their firearms around children and terrible things happen. That's the kind of thing that after the fact, there's always thoughts and prayers and, oh my gosh, why was this allowed? And then it seems like we forget, and then it happens again, and it's lather, wash, repeat. It's so long past time to hold people accountable for the responsibility.
Personal responsibility, right?
Personal responsibility. That's important, right? That means locking up your firearms and keeping them away from children. We know that there is a huge backlog of untested rape kits in Indiana. There are quite a few reasons contributing to this backlog, and it absolutely is tragic that we've got victims who their test kits just sit untested. And so we're seeing some bills to empower and support those victims in coming forward. That's not easy. I mean, to ask someone who's been traumatized to then, publicly name their attacker and go on the offense, that's really hard. So addressing the rape kit backlog starts with empowering those victims to be able to come forward. It also means allocating funds to address it and having the data to know where we need to best allocate funds and resources. So we've got some bills to address the rape kit backlog and to empower and support sexual assault victims. As in previous years, we see bills to decriminalize marijuana, whether it's at a medicinal level, recreational level. We've seen bills for both. We know that Indiana is an island in terms of legalization, and we're just hemorrhaging money that could be used to, say, offset property tax. If we want to lower property tax, how do we replace that lost revenue? Or if the legislature is moving forward with funding private schools with public money, or allowing charter schools to take a piece of the funding pie of property taxes, how do we offset that? How do we make sure that we've got more funds available? Legalizing and regulating marijuana could be a very effective way to do that.
The supermajority always seems to want to focus on the spending side, which, fair, but also bringing in more revenue should also be on the table.
Yes, and responsibly using that money. I mean, why are we sitting on billions in surplus? That money is our money. It's taxpayer money. We should be seeing that money used to benefit and better our lives, not just sitting in an account. As much as the public schools are under attack, we are really satisfied to see that there are some good bills to strengthen. There's a legislator who's put forth bills from the Republican side to restore some of the collective bargaining rights, the teacher unions' rights that have been taken away over the years. We really hope to see that one moving through. Those are SB 229 and 230. There are other bills to hold the voucher accepting private schools and the charter schools a little bit more accountable, kind of even the playing field. We hold public schools accountable in terms of, school boards have to meet publicly and they have to disclose all of this information, and charters and private schools aren't held to those same standards. So the idea is, okay, if our new normal is voucher private schools and charter schools are here and they're going
to get plenty of money,
then let's make them accountable. Let's not have these two different systems, where we expect our public schools to have to toe the line and then the others sort of get to do a lot more with a lot less oversight. So having the similar accountability requirements, we see bills about regulating some of the money flowing into politics by putting a cap on how much money PACs can give to school board races. Bills to repeal right to work. So from an economic standpoint, again, some of these bills, it's going to be a very, very far long shot. But it's a place to start, and we the people need to make some noise.
Like when we're talking to these folks, it's it's good that there are. We talked about the nightmare bills at the beginning of this interview, but there's also stuff in there that we would like to see passed. And if you're going to call your legislator, maybe it's nice to say, in addition to, hey, this is terrible, you need to kill this bill.
Yes.
Hey, here's also some good stuff. It's like the classic compliment sandwich.
And it works.
Like, here's 2 good pieces of legislation you should support, and this bad one that you should not.
Absolutely. And it does matter, and to call and say, hey, I really like this bill that you filed. I just, I wanted to say that, and I hope that this bill makes it through committee, and I'm excited, to see my representative or senator vote yes on it. Those kinds of things, they don't get a lot of calls about that, and that does help. We also see
those poor legislative assistants probably appreciate those too.
They do, yeah. I mean, they get yelled at a lot. So calling and saying, "Hey, I just wanted to say, good job. I like this bill. Thank you." Takes 30 seconds. But yeah, I mean, there's so many bills that you can look through. There's quite a few to help with the housing attainability. We talked a little bit about property taxes, but the impact that out-of-state corporations that are snapping up all of these single-family homes and apartment complexes, that really makes housing a lot less affordable. Yeah. And quality goes down. You've got someone who doesn't even live here managing properties. Takes forever to get the parking lot plowed, with all the snow that we got recently, because their property manager lives in Florida. And so we see some bills to sort of crack down on that, to require or at least regulate them from snapping up all of this property. Because then we also see rental payments leaving Indiana instead of staying here in our local economy. So that's something that we really hope, when we talk about, like, oh gosh, let's lower property taxes and make housing more affordable. Like, well, okay, but when you do that, you're taking away from all of our local services in our public schools. Maybe a way to make housing more affordable and attainable is to instead regulate some of these bad actors who are taking a lot of the inventory and then jacking the prices up, and then they're not even at good quality. They're unsafe, and that's something that we really think is worth the state stepping in.
So sounds like there's a lot going on, a lot to keep our eyes on, and you guys at MADVoters are keeping track of all of it for us. Where is that MADVoters bill tracker again there, Kaitie?
You can go to just madvoters.org, our main website, and we've got it linked on the homepage. And then we've got, across the top of the website, different tabs you can click on. So if you look at the tracker, you'll see the list of bills. You can see where the bills are, if they have upcoming actions, like, hey, this bill's heading to committee. If you haven't called the committee people to say, I want you to support this bill, you need to do that. We've got how you can contact your legislators. And if you want to get involved with MADVoters itself, there's a Connect with Us where you can fill out our volunteer intake survey. We've got information on how a bill becomes a law. We've got information on different community resources. So just a lot of information there on our website. And then we're also on Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, and TikTok. And we're sort of working on YouTube as well. Seems like social media has really been in upheaval lately. So we're also kind of taking a look at some of these new up-and-coming platforms. But you can also follow us, and we've got all of our calls to action on those main socials too.
All right, easy to find and some easy steps to take. Kaitie, did we miss anything today that you want to make sure we get in?
I don't think so. I think the biggest thing, so many of us at MADVoters, whether they're core members of the team or they're, volunteers who have been with us for a while, weren't particularly involved in politics until Roe, I think, 2022.
Yeah.
In 2020, the election, the presidential election, we've seen a shift, over the last few years for people who have I didn't pay attention to politics when I was younger, but now all of a sudden it's a big deal. And so to those people, I would say, don't wait for permission. Don't wait for someone to come along to tell you or to teach you, or to rescue us. With MADVoters, we are a group that really prides itself on just diving in, learning as we go, and breaking things down in an accessible way. And basically helping people understand that politics and civics isn't something just for elite people or for people who studied political science in college. It's for everyone. It's for the college students. Politics is for the stay-at-home moms and dads. Politics is for the retired grandmas and grandpas. We want to sort of take away this idea of, well, I don't know about that, or I don't understand how that works, or my opinion doesn't matter, and help people understand, it does matter. Your thoughts do matter. You can understand and you can learn this, and we will help you, because the caveat is, we understand it is complicated. We've been there. We haven't, been working, and we're not experts in this field by any means, but we are here because we care, and we feel like we've learned some good things along the way, and we want to pass it off and share it with you guys. And that's kind of the vibe we have here at MADVoters. So it's really about breaking down barriers, making things accessible, and making things less intimidating.
Yeah. Democracy. It's
yes, it is.
It takes all of us.
It does. And it needs to be more about rolling up your sleeves and just sort of figuring it out along the way, and less about I'll just let someone else figure it out. The reality is other people aren't, going to figure it out. It is up to us. And if we just sort of sit back and let the chips fall, we see what happens is the status quo just cements itself even more, gets more entrenched, and gets further away from benefiting just regular people. And so we've sort of got to take back that power. So don't be afraid to do that.
We really appreciate you, appreciate MADVoters and all you do to help give us the tools to participate in our democracy.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for letting us be here.
Apologies for the abrupt ending there. That was Kaitie Rector, Director of Advocacy for MADVoters Indiana. Don't wait for permission. Great closing words. The most wonderful thing about democracy is also its biggest weakness. We don't need permission to participate. In fact, it demands we take part. And our participation does not end on Election Day. Maybe those you preferred to represent you did not win. But those who did emerge victorious are still your representatives. What power they have is exercised in your name. Their decisions affect your day-to-day life. You pay their salaries. And even though we may have lost in November, all is not lost. Yes, Indiana's Republican supermajority have drawn themselves into seats they cannot lose. They may have escaped our wrath at the ballot box, so now they must face our wrath in their inbox, in their voicemail, in their comments sections, and under a mountain of letters. Voting may not have produced wins, but public pressure, the sheer power of shame and embarrassment, might prevent losses. The legislative process presents several important choke points, and our last best chances, when faced with their worst, to gum up the works. Know your state rep. Know your state senator. Never forget, you're their boss. Pick one piece of legislation that affects you, your family, your community, and tell them how you feel. You don't have to stalk your representatives, but follow up. And most importantly, talk to your neighbors and encourage them to speak out too. I've got links to all the legislation we've talked about here today in the show notes, and of course, I'll link to MADVoters. We'll make it easy for you to track these bills, to talk to your representatives, and to exercise your right to mutually assured democracy. Thank you for listening, and thanks again to my guest today, Kaitie Rector. Visit madvoters.org to access all of the resources we talked about today, and while you're there, click on that donate button and help them keep cultivating civic engagement here in Indiana. Finally, if you're feeling a little extra generous, if you got a little bit left over, head on over to scottaaronrogers.substack.com and help support this project with a paid subscription. That is where you'll find everything I publish, but you can also find me on Facebook, Blue Sky, YouTube, and TikTok at Who's Left, and on most other social media sites at ScottRog78. Look out for a breakdown of HB 1136, perhaps the worst of all the bills highlighted today, coming up later this week with our public education expert, Dr. Michael Schaefer. If you need me before then, my DMs are open for feedback, tips, ideas, and concerns. You can also email me at scottrog78@gmail.com. Forward the show to a friend, have them forward it to another friend. Let's keep building this project and a more democratic state. Until next time, this has been the Who's Left podcast. I'm Scott Aaron Rogers. Love each other, Indiana.